I am here with the composing duo Zach Robinson and Leo Birenberg. Is it Birenberg or
That's right, Birenberg.
excellent? Excellent. All right. Both of them were the composers on Cobra Kai, Weird the Al Yankovic Story, and Pitch Perfect. Yeah, Pitch Perfect Bumper in Berlin. My apologies. Just wanted to make sure I got that right. So yes, I think probably I'd like to focus on first the Weird the Al Yankovic story. How were you both brought onto the project?
We have worked with the director before, actually a pretty close creative relationship for years and years. Um, and it's funny because like this weird movie was always something he was like talking about because he had created I really like a concept trailer like a decade earlier when he was working with Funny or Die. And he was always like, yeah, one day I want that to be a movie. Like, yeah, that might be a movie. Oh, I was talking to Al, like it could be a movie. And then one day it was a movie. And he called us.
Yeah, excellent. The director actually highlighted your music in the My Bologna inspiration scene, calling it this huge John Williams like moment. Were there any movie scores in particular you drew on for inspiration for the whole throughout the movie? Like,
Yeah,
I
a
would
few. Like we did that one in particular we love, and we're very happy that he shouted us out in that clip. But we love that cue, and I think like part of our influence for the movie was we were really inspired by kind of like mid 90s, early 90s, like Alan Silvestri scores, Americana style, like Forrest Gump, or like the Rudy soundtrack from the 80s, something that's like really inspirational and motivational and sincere, of course. And like what else? We had it like there's so many different genres within the movie. I feel like we have our Predator soundtrack reference, our John Wick soundtrack reference. There's some Star Wars Episode 1 soundtrack reference in the LSD sequence. Yeah, we're just all over the place in that one.
Yeah. It's the kind of our concept for the film was to score it like it was a great American hero story from the early 1990s. And so any score in that world was cultural inspiration.
yeah, I definitely felt like a little bit of the Back to the Future vibes with that scene
Excellent.
Right.
in particular. Yeah.
Great.
And yeah, it's funny that you also mentioned genres because being a parody of like biopics and also like many other genres of movies, Weird has also seems to borrow from a whole bunch of different music genres. So were there any tricks that you really liked using to get to like kind of play with these different genres of music?
Well, to play with them, the trick was to find ways to sneak the accordion into
Right.
other completely unrelated genres of music. The scene you mentioned, like the Epiphany, My Bologna scene, like there's accordion working its way in the orchestra, like part of the busy texture. One of our favorites is the diner fight, which is very kind of John Wick-esque, just really intense modern action movie music. But lo and behold, there is palming of an accordion in some of the bigger hits. So we had some fun sneaking that in and kind of deciding like, well, normally we would use X instrument, but since we're doing this movie, let's use the accordion instead for that role. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Uh, did Weird Al himself have any kind of suggestions for like places you could use the accordion in the movie, or was it mostly
Yes,
left up to you?
Al was very focused on the polkas. There's there's a few polka covers that we had to do of like famous polka tunes for the scene where young Al goes to the polka party. Um, and Al is, an expert on the topic. And so we did a version of them, and he was like, "Oh, no, this isn't quite traditional enough. In like, you got to do X, Y, Z, like A, B, C." And so we basically got a private lesson in polka writing from Al himself, and they turned out much better for it.
Yeah, for sure. It was a lot of fun to hear Al talk about polkas. He was very passionate about it.
Very.
Yeah. Speaking of Weird Al, were either of you fans of his before working on the project, or
Who
is not a fan? Who is not a fan of Weird Al? Like truly, like I don't even know if anyone. I was very. It was pretty cool for us to work on it, and he was my first concert ever when I was 9 years old, 8 years old. So it was very cool to come full circle on that. But everyone loves him, even if you don't listen to the music. He's like that. It's like the universal appeal of the man is unrivaled. Like everyone just respects him. If you're not familiar with his music, you just respect him.
yeah, and it's such a funny thing, like for in particular for the genre of music that he plays, like polka, like I'd argue, like at least in the American polka scene, like there's almost no artist who is like as universally beloved as like as Weird Al.
Not to mention, like no one will ever be able to write like parody songs ever again. Basically, like he's kind of like not only has
He's the only game in
it,
town,
but he's the only game in town, and he's the only one that would just be able to get away with it at this point. Like I think anyone else would kind of just would either be kind of called up, like it just like wouldn't, it would be like ripping Weird Al, who's ripping everybody else.
That's actually a very interesting point, because like on the Mary Sue, we cover like geek and nerd culture all the time, but on YouTube especially, there's like this entire subculture of like parody artists who like write songs based off of like video games or movies or
Mm-hmm.
TV shows and stuff like that. Like Steve from Stranger Things sings a song and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I can't help but wonder how much of that little microeconomy has kind of sprouted up due in part to like Weird Al and the Weird Al Yankovic kind of influence. Like
100%. It's also
it's a
like
great point.
It's YouTube is so ripe for that. Like that's such a good environment for that type of music and parody and all that stuff. It's just what's crazy about Weird Al is that he actually converted it into like record sales. At a time when like he had a #1 album when like Madonna had a #1 album. Like that's unbelievable.
Insane.
And I just don't think that'll ever happen.
Yeah.
So it's like part of the stuff, and it's very genuine. Like some of the stuff we're scoring, even though it's like big and it's a parody or whatever, it's genuine in a sense because it is a very monumental like just career.
Yeah, speaking of Mr. Yankovic's career, there was like you did start to get into like a little bit of anachronisms in the end. Like the story supposedly ends in 1985, but he also like is claiming to have written Amish Paradise and like right before then, even though that song didn't come around until the 90s. Then I was wondering if you guys had a particular Weird Al song that was like more modern that you wish you had somehow made it into the movie, or like maybe we could have like Zombie Yankovic appear in like a sequel.
So my favorite, first of all, I would love the Zombie Yankovic sequel. Like I just, based on how great the first movie turned out and how beloved it was, I can't imagine it not being hugely popular. Yeah, wow, that would be amazing. My favorite Weird Al song is actually Windows 95 Sucks. Which is kind of a random one, and it is just because at the time I thought it was extremely funny because I was like trying to like when that came out, I was like trying to install Windows to work on my like old Mac as like using like the predecessor to Boot Camp so that I could play some fucking game that like you couldn't play on Mac because that used to be a thing. And like it would just crash nonstop, and then like I discovered that song and I thought it was hilarious, and I used to just play it like on repeat. So that one's pretty special to me.
I love the Running with Scissors album. So that's like Pretty Fly for a Rabbi. And that's the story, the saga begins. The American Pie one is a great
Oh
one. I
yeah.
just remember that music video. Mid
Oh,
stage
that
out.
music video.
Is that kind of mid stage out? I also love like that, like I love the like That's Your Horoscope. I love the polka like mashups that he does, like the polka medleys. Um I just thought it was funny that all the like songs that were in the movie, which they reference and they make fun of, I think with the exception of like a surgeon, they're all the food ones. And it is funny that it's like just all the food ones.
Yeah, to be fair, like eat it, and then there was a brief reference to fat, though that didn't end up like
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. To be fair, those were both Michael Jackson parodies, so I think the connection there is a little.
I mean, "Eat It" is like my favorite joke in the whole movie. I just think it's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant as like a plot point.
Right. Sorry, I'm getting like the sun is just about to shine.
Consuming you.
Like they're consuming me, yeah.
It's like sunshine.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm in Arizona. Trust me, I understand like trying to fight the sunlight.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Any other particular favorite song, favorite pieces of soundtrack that you'd love for people to take a look at, or
Zach,
I
what
guess
are our
listen to?
faves?
Well, parody of Eat It, as we just mentioned, I think is one of
Oh
our
yeah,
favorites.
that's a good cue. That's a good cue.
Al's speech we love. I love the fact, I love like when his dad apologizes and shows him that he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt. That's one of my favorites. Bologna, the accordion when the accordion salesman comes is one of my faves. What else, Leah? We have a lot. We had such an amazing time scoring.
Yeah, it was pretty much every single music starred in that movie. Like we had some fun with in one way or another. It's a really special score to us. Like we put a lot into it.
Yeah.
And we also just think it sounds really good. We recorded the whole thing in Budapest with like an 80-piece orchestra. And like that's kind of part of the authentic retro sound.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, now moving on to Pitch Perfect, Bumper in Berlin. You've gone from scoring more serious shows like Cobra Kai to more comedic series and movies like Weird and Pitch Perfect. So, are there any ways that you approach the music differently in order to get that kind of comedic tone to the music, or do you approach it just as seriously as you would with like any other?
Well, it's an interesting question because like the palettes are so different, but I think what Zach and I really like to bring to every project, comedy or not, and we do tend to do a lot of comedy, and like Cobra Kai is kind of an example of like it is dark in ways, but it's kind of like absurdist in ways too. Like it's just this karate soap opera. But where I'm going with that is we like our buzzword between us is like sincerity. And so whenever we approach like a comedy show like Bumper, we're mostly concerned with like finding the heart of the show as kind of the backbone and figuring out how to score those emotional arcs of the characters. And then we kind of build around it to accentuate the jokes where it's needed. So very rarely do we ever go into something being like, yeah, we need to like make this funny, because the show is hilarious, like hysterical by itself. Like I think it's so funny. It's very my brand of humor specifically. And so like yeah, 2000 circa 2010 acapella Euro trip joke, like exactly Leo Birenberg comedy. And so like, but we never approach it as like we need to make something funny. We want to make sure that the audience is connecting with the characters, and then it helps all the jokes that are already funny play better because then you care about everyone you're watching on screen. And so that was kind of that was like our job from day one on Bumper.
On top of that, we always like to like kind of go as hard as possible in the score direction that we choose, and like we really try to make every project unique, and Bumper with no exception. Like we basically tried to pull every single German musical trope that you could pull into one soundtrack. So we have everything from like Kraftwerk, 70s Kraftwerk, to like German opera, to industrial music like Rammstein, like, you know, there was some polka overlap. We were working on Bumper and Weird around the same time. There was some polka overlap, and it was so much fun. And credit goes to also Megan Amram, who was the showrunner, who let us kind of go whole hog. Yeah.
There's also one question I really would love to ask. What is it like kind of making music for a series about a cappella singers where arguably your music isn't kind of playing in some of the most important scenes?
It's awesome because it's less work. Every time, all the really difficult stuff, and these incredible, these amazing a cappella arrangements that are in the show, or just like song arrangements that aren't a cappella, like that stuff is so good. And it's great because we didn't have to do it.
It's funny because like when we start a finale episode of like Cobra Kai, it's always kind of like we're going in just like mentally prepared that we're just going to score just like, you know, wall to wall action, 50 minutes. It's going to be the most epic fight you've ever seen and heard. And we have to like just, it's always so maximalist. And going into like the season finale of Bumper, where our brains are so kind of primed for that like final score, and all the big set pieces are there, it's their big performance, and like it's all been done already, and we were like, great, like we're gonna show up and just do the score in between, which is important, and there were a lot of important cues for us to do, but it's you know, I think all the really heavy lifting was done by the pre-production team and the song producers, who did an incredible job.
Yeah, I want to make it clear, I'm not discounting the work you did.
No. If anybody is, it's us.
Yeah.
Right. Also, I found this kind of interesting reference that apparently Elizabeth Banks made. Apparently, the idea for this series first came about when she saw like the MCU was doing a Loki show, and she got the idea for making the and well-liked antagonist into the protagonist of his own spin-off show, and that's allegedly how Bumper came to be.
I saw that too, actually. I thought that was very interesting. There's also another show that did that, which is called Cobra Kai.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I actually think Bumper is Cobra Kai. It's the antagonist in the first movie who gets a redemption story, and hilarity ensues.
Yep.
Same thing.
Yeah. So my question that was kind of looping around to that was, were there any kind of like musical cues that you kind of took from previous Pitch Perfect movies, or like things like that to kind of like connect them, the thorough lines, like, you know how the MCU loves its Easter eggs and stuff like that.
Yeah, so, not really in any kind of overtly thematically related way. I would say like our one like non-German palette thing was that we tried to like use vocals kind of in some of the score, like that, like there's a bit of an a cappella feel and some stuff. And like that was really fun because that's just like, it's like you don't usually get to write that when you're doing film music. But I don't know if we had any Easter eggs.
The fun Easter egg is that Leo and I were I was an intern on the first Pitch Perfect movie.
Yes, that is the Easter egg.
That's the Easter egg.
Well, that's a pretty cool Easter egg if you ask me. Like,
yeah, but no, they really, I think, I mean, the show is so different than the movies. Like I watched the movies like when we first started, and the tone is just completely different. the movies. Similarly to Cobra Kai and the Karate Kid, it's just like a totally different kind of personality. And I think the music just needed to kind of ride with that new tone.
I agree with Zach.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for meeting with me and for doing this interview. I guess my
Thank you.
last question is, do you have any tips for people, like people who are still trying, creatives who are still trying to break into the industry and are really hopeful that one day they'll get to be able to work on like some of their favorite franchises, or work with some of their greatest idols, like you guys got to with Weird Al and all that?
I'm a big proponent of just being as enthusiastic as possible in approaching everything you do. I think that goes a really, really long way, and people remember that. And you work with someone on something and you know, put a lot of, it's not even just effort, it's like enthusiasm into it. And that's the type of energy that everyone in Hollywood likes to collaborate with, and they'll remember you next time, or, you know, someone will know somebody. And it just kind of like, when you work in entertainment, you don't have a lot of control over like how the connections are made. The one thing you have control over is just like how you come across at all times. And so do it with a smile on your face.
And I agree with everything that you just said. And I would just say be as authentic as you can, because I think that will get you quite far. Just being yourself and being enthusiastic, as Leo said. And things can happen. Like, I mean, I never thought that I'd work with Weird Al, let alone score his biopic. So you just do not know.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So yes, this was interview with Leo Birenberg and Zach Robinson, composers for the Totally True Weird the Al Yankovic Story, and as well as series like Cobra Kai and Pitch Perfect, Bumper in Berlin. Yeah, thank you so much for meeting with me. And yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.